back to my father is called The Porch, after Philip Levine. The splintery wooden stairs leading up to the large porch of the sprawling Victorian rooming house is modeled black and bright from the wrought iron light fixture suspended over the center of the octagonal poker table. And the banter of the six players around the table in their wicker chairs reaches you at the bottom of the stairs, so you pause there. You're filled with the joy that comes to a great athlete when his body has astonished him again. A few droplets of salt water glinting from your skin. You'd left your narrow, high-ceilinged houseware store on Avenue D, stopped in your rented room where I waited for you, exchanged short-sleeved shirt and slacks and leather shoes for sandals, towel, and bathing suit, and headed for the ocean, where you swam through and beyond the breakers, far beyond the rotted jetties, as the sun set and you vanished in the distance in the darkness of a moonless Saturday night in July, alone except for the 8-year-old boy staring out at the sea from the galvanized boardwalk railing as he did every week. You're ravenous now at the foot of the stairs, and you know your wife has ladled out blistering hot chicken soup with kreplach into the green glass summer soup bowl on the faded Formica table. And the 6 others you play with every week will deal you in whenever you come down to the nickel and dime poker game. No small stakes for the 7 of you in the 1950s, shopkeepers, garment workers, butchers, and grocers who were taking 1 or 2 days off each week from the 10-hour workdays of summer in the city. Harry Horn, let me enter your story as you stand motionless in the speckled light at the bottom of the stairs, breathing the rich, salty air. Don't go up yet. Let your mind take you back to the powerful strokes that pulled you far into the Atlantic, fearless over very deep water, or entirely at your ease, floating on your back out there, your chest glowing faintly in the starlight as your breath reaches in and out deeply and your eyes open wide to the vast canopy of and exploding stars. Inserted in this book is a prose narrative, a memoir of my father. I found that sort of thinking about my father and remembering him over the years, that poetry does one thing and it doesn't do, maybe a group of poems can try to do that, but it doesn't do what a prose narrative can do in terms of inside and outside, I thought. So this is a long piece called My Father the Swimmer. And in it, I speak to my father after he's had a stroke, and there's no, it's unlikely that he understands what I'm saying. It's possible that occasionally he does. And this is one section of this. August 1952. He was there one morning when I woke up early at the enormous Victorian rooming house we were staying in near the beach. He looked older than you, a little shorter than you, and 20 or 30 pounds heavier. A solid, stocky man. He spoke mostly in Yiddish. To my delight, the occasional English he used was articulately British. You told me he was from your hometown. His eyes were funny, sometimes twinkling good-naturedly, sometimes dead, sometimes with a terrible irony that mystified me. He didn't towel himself off when he came out of the ocean or when he took an outdoor shower. He loved to let the water dry at its own rate. It's refreshing, you know, he confided to me, trying to win me over. But I played hard to get. I don't know why. With Mother, he was quite formal and polite, even a little diffident, but it was you he was here to see. And how you talked. Up and down the long, hot day, I knew something was up when you set out with him on that walk in the middle of the afternoon because you were wearing only your bathing suit and your floppy hat. Nothing protected your pale skin from the sun. And what made it even more unusual was that there was no Harry, watch yourself, you'll get a burn, or even a glance and a sign for a mother as you walked off with the stranger, your robe draped messily on your beach chair. Later, I'm sitting at the bottom of the stairs leading up to our room where you two are still talking, not making out the words, though even as a kid, I can discern the quiet intensity in your tone. Then you're shouting questions and commands, and his voice becomes so faint I can barely hear it. The door flies open and crashes against the wall. He lunges out first, then you, and you're saying, "Ich verstehe ganz gut." I understand very well. Ich kenne das Verleiden. I can't bear it. And you have tears in your eyes. It terrifies me. You seem half in fury and half in anguish, and I hang back as you shove him down the stairs. When I finally gather the nerve to drag myself to the porch, you are pushing him past old Mr. Charnick sitting at the big poker table down at the far end of the porch. The guy is making this weird keening sound that takes my breath away. I call out, but you don't turn. I run back inside, sit on the stairs, and started sobbing. I don't know why. It was at least 20 minutes later when I slowly went out to the porch again. Old Mr. Charnick still sat there in one of the big wicker armchairs, tapping his loose-fisted right hand on the table in front of him, mumbling, "Again, it's me, only me that keep waiting," closing his fist and snapping the ring on his pinky knuckle sharply against the formica surface. "And card players, they call themselves," he was saying. "When the one everyone calls Bluestone, the only one of the men you seem to have anything to do with away from the card table, came in and sat down. I crouched down between the porch rail and the wicker sofa, one of my favorite hiding places. "Such a commotion," Charnick said, "and you just missed the whole thing. First, inside, someone's crashing down the stairs, not falling, but jumping 4 or 5 steps at a time is what it sounded like. And hollering in Yiddish, and a body smacking hard against something. Harry says, 'To me, you're the angel of death, the Malach HaMovis.' No, no." Then the two of them come flying out right onto the porch. Harry and that Harry guy who was nosing around before. English, he sounded, asking about Harry and his family. The guy with the crazy eyes, they wouldn't keep still. The rest of him looked like he was made of rock, I'm telling you. But those eyes are something else, and Harry's crying and shoving him all along the length of the porch. The guy keeps turning, and Harry keeps shoving him. And then in the middle, the kid comes out, and he's whining, "Daddy, Daddy," as Harry keeps pushing the guy down the porch stairs to the street. And all the time, the guy is making this high sound like a sick cat, and he winds up on his hands and knees on the sidewalk. I got up and leaned over to get a good look, and he's on one knee looking up at Harry. And then he got up and started backing away and turned around. And then he's gone and it's over. "So," says Bluestone. I peer over the sofa. The two of them are staring at each other, and I know that what I'm about to hear is the most important thing in the world. "So you're asking and I'm telling." So Harry sits down right where you're sitting, and you can see he's been crying. And you know, we're not that close, and I ain't sure I want to hear what he's going to tell me. But his eyes are so wild, not like the other guy, but for him, I'm saying. I keep my trap shut, and I get the whole story. The guy, and Harry never says his name. Every time the name is coming out, you know, in a normal sort of way, Harry changes it to he or him, like the name is burning his tongue. It turns out the guy was a good friend of Harry's big brother, Maciek, back in Poland, in a city called Sambor. All of them, the brother, Harry, the guy, were machers in the Zionist club in the town. It was the first I heard of it. About things like that, he ain't a big talker. So again, just listen. It was in 41, I think, and the Russians had pulled out and the Germans were coming. Harry had already left in the 30s, and some goyim hid their sister in Vienna the whole time. But his brother, this Mutik, stayed behind with his wife and 2 boys. And this guy, the same guy, comes to Mutik and says, "Let's go, we got to get out of here." And Mutik says, "Right you are, I'll get the wife and the boys and I'll meet you in Chana and Shendel." Harry did say those names, and we'll get out. He asked the guy to give him an hour, I think. And the guy says to Mutik, "No, you don't get it. It's you and me, and it's right now or we're all dead." And Mutik said, "No," said Bluestone. And Mutik said, "No." And Harry tells you all this, and Harry tells me all this. And the guy got away and has been living in Israel and has a new wife and a boy and a girl, and all the rest were lost, a sister and cousins, all of them. Some nerve, Harry says to me. And he tells me he was in the battle for Jerusalem in 48. What the hell am I supposed to do with that tasty tidbit, the Oisvorth? Our brilliant Bluestone says more to himself than to Charnock. He had to know Harry would have given anything to have been there. But let me get this right. You're telling me he came all the way from Israel just to tell to Harry the story about his brother Mutik? That's what I'm telling you exactly. And he also let it drop that he fought in the war of 48? I guess so. The poor bastard, says Bluestone. You're right. It's too bad for Harry. Never in my life have I seen a man so wild looking, an animal. He was jumping and skipping and stopping, not like a regular person, running like that. The first time in my life I saw something like that. That's true, said Bluestone. I believe you. But it's the other one I was thinking about just now. Both of them. The poor bastards. I remember quietly sneaking out from my hideout and tiptoeing up the stairs, then turning around and racing down the stairs and past the 2 of them who called out to me as I jumped off the porch. I caught sight of you coming back, not from the beach, but from the other direction, where there were blocks of overgrown lots, grass up to my shoulders, where all the kids played Ringalivio and caught grasshoppers and cicadas and praying mantises late into the hot summer nights. I sneaked a look at your face, then looked down and said, "Daddy, take me for a swim." Not now. Your voice sounded a lot calmer. So this was not only the first time I saw you cry, it was also the only time you ever turned me down about a swim, that is. I've never read that out loud before, I should say. Next one's called Baseball. I never played catch with my father, nor soccer. Never saw him don a baseball glove or cap, though he'd sometimes appear on the sidelines on the vast black parking lot that glistened in the July heat to watch my big brother and his crew of high school juniors and seniors in the fast-pitch softball games they wagered on against other Rockaway neighborhoods up and down the beaches Sunday mornings. The arcana of baseball baffled and amused him, but put a bat in his hand, give him a few pointers about stance and grip and so on, and just try to fling the ball by him at 40 feet. Fat chance. But soccer was his star sport in his 20s and in his teens and early 20s in Poland. A proper noun that never crossed his lips in my hearing, save one weekend 60 years ago when he took me to Randall's Island, I in college, he in his 50s, to see Poland, to his enormous pleasure, get thrashed 2 games in a row by Pelé and Brazil. "How come you never taught me soccer?" I asked, to the tune of one more felicitous feint by Pelé. "This is America," is what he said. "Baseball, baseball." Never seen him happier. And this is another aspect of him. Opera. Sometimes when I think of my father's last 7 years, his language so shattered, I remember only 3 occasions when I even suspected I could read his desire. I find myself adrift. If time were not inexorable, and we'd known to call in a music therapist who might have nurtured his brain enough to make him one of those rare stroke survivors able to sing, if not speak, his desires, to the tune of Non piandrai, for instance, or La ci darem la mano, which he loved. And he stands before me, alive now, right hand cupped open, relaxed, his first finger pointing upward, his pale, clear eyes and the tilt of his head steering us toward the record player as he tried once again to induce us to hear the beauty of some small inflection in Pinza's rendering of the song. And as I look up from my notebook, I can almost hear his baritone crooning, "Bring me some coffee, Bella." But your art therapy studies wouldn't begin until 4 years later. And no, never would he sing his desires. And as for music, hearing it, being comforted by it, by the end, he couldn't even bear to listen to Jussi Björling, even with the volume turned way down, hitting the soul-piercing final notes of Nessun Dorma. Vincero, vincero. This part of the book ends with a sequence of poems called The Merit of Ancestors. And I'm going to read 3 of them. The first, the middle one, and the last of them. The first is called Try to Remember. Try to remember moments you can't know. Not just the long, slow summers at the beach, the high rolling waves you rode, the sand crab's nips. The time your mother took you to see Jack Kennedy, hatless in the bitter wind coming off the East River as he leaned over the 5-foot-tall labor leader and warmed the old man's hand in both of his, hair on fire in the bright winter sun. You should remember moments you can't know. Not just your father speeding through the Seder, your mother's off-key voice that cracked as she tried in vain every year without fail to reproduce her father's nigun for the closing song, Chasal Sidur Pesach Kehilchato. You must remember moments you can't know, more than the conversations that swerved into rapid-fire Yiddish when you came into the living room, though you did make out some of the hushed names and words, Motik, Rivka, Pogrom, Lager. Remember the moments you can't know. The murders a few months apart of your great-grandfather and your grandfather, along with 200,000 other Jews in the Ukraine and Poland 26 years before you were born. The way your grandfather used to look up from his Talmud, walk over to his open study window, stand there as your mother bounced her ball in the yard just outside, and count every bounce. And this is what my mother revealed, which is the earliest time that in this book. What my mother revealed. Every Friday morning, the Slaughterers Collective would gather at my grandfather's study and place the week's earnings in assorted currencies on the large table, where from the time she was 8, my mother, his youngest, would count out the shares as her father beamed at her from the head of the table, where other days he'd pore over his Talmud. A couple of years later, when she eyed him from her position on the floor of his study, distracted from her math homework by having glimpsed a classmate being beaten by his father as she passed his house after school, in answer to her question, he wove a long tale about the one time his own father struck him when he was 10, as she was then. He had climbed a rickety fence to spy on the Bratslavar Hasidim, who descend on their town, Uman, for the entire month of the holy season to lament, beseech, fast, and sing wordless melodies at the grave of their leader. This abandonment of family in the holy season, a topic of derision and gossip among the native Jews of Uman. The boy came upon an empty square, a ramshackle grill, curling smoke and spitting fire, a slab of beef so large it was probably meant to feed the entire teeming horde who left their wives and kids. I tipped it over, he said exuberantly, having raced home with the news. The beef crashed everywhere, oil and dust everywhere. Oh no, the father raised his arm and smacked his son downward across the face so hard it knocked him to the ground. It's a shanda, a great wrong you've done, my boy, he said, lifting the son to his feet. Whatever we say about them inside our home, and now I discern my own fault in this matter, and your mother's. You must never forget they too are Jews. They are human beings like us. Abstracted, he shook his head slowly from side to side, wrapped the boy in his arms. Now, my child, I must go out to them. I must deal with this, and grabbed his hat and jacket and left. And now the last poem in that section, in which my father, it's called My Father Speaks, and some of you will recognize the echo of from Deuteronomy of the Shema prayer. My father speaks. He's had enough of my talking. My father speaks. You have forgotten me. The claim you're fond of, that you think of me every day when you shave. What sort of remembrance is that? In your prayers, you murmur the wish, I rest in peace. Peace from what? Are you remembering my chronic rages, as vague to me now as the fine sleet of winter? Or is it only an odd sense of proper manners, as if you really believed in prayer? Better to speak about me to your grandchildren in the evening and the morning. That might calm the restlessness I feel that has only grown sharper in this shadowy place. Or even better, to remember when I could still swim out beyond the jetties with you on my back, your little nails scratching the skin over my collarbones as you clung to me in fright and glee with all your heart and all your might. Best of all, swim out beyond whatever breakers hold you back now. Think of me and do not be afraid. Okay, I guess now we're in the realm of friendship and loves and family in another way. This one's called 45 Years Ago. Yet another hazy grad school party late, our host asleep on his back on the living room floor again. As music reverberates and the rest of us dance or pick our way around him, laughing, drinking, smoking. And I've come to a stop in the kitchen doorway, and there's his wife, beautiful in profile. She always the solidest of us all, the one searched out when drugs threw us off keel or our latest love affair went awry into heartbreak. There she was in profile, still, slightly twisted and bent, staring at the wall over the sink, unable to hear or make a sound. And the only word that comes to mind now is stricken, as tears stream down her cheeks. And I slipped back through the doorway into the din of the party, her husband still passed out on the floor, and I, willfully innocent, I realize only now, intruder, not friend, coward. And this one is not in my voice, but in an imagined voice, and it's dedicated to, it's called The Widower, and it's dedicated to Bully. I sit up in bed, wakened by the snap and sharp scrape of branches, window rattling in a long wind, like taking a first sip of coffee and it's salt. Was I the one who put salt in the sugar bowl? On the other side of the bed, the sheet is chilly, like the loud and distant moan of the train whistle at the crossing downtown. I understand this feeling is here to stay, like my oversized gray sweater she loved to wrap herself in, reading in bed winter nights, like the smell of old wool, like the trace still there of her Sicilian cologne. This next poem is an aubade. An aubade is of an old form that's a poem said at dawn and spoken by a lover to his or her lover at dawn. This is called Aubade Wonderland. Half asleep in the merry grays of pre-dawn light, the wall I sleep against on our granddaughter's bed is soothing and cool in the warm Tel Aviv November morning. At eye level are the pinafore and dress of Tenniel's giant Alice, a yard high, rendered by our granddaughter in Sharpie, a gift for herself between wake and dream. I roll over carefully, and inches from my eyes is your face. You're on your back, lips parted slightly. The sound of your breath inaudible, even this close up. You look 30. Your quiet breathing slow in and out, like the swelling and easing of the Mediterranean, smooth and glistening as far as the eye can see, bearing her bosom to the sky just before sunset yesterday. The marks and wrinkles of your face from so many decades of living in gravity somehow absorbed into flesh in this moment, as I am absorbed, until the first drip of sunlight pings your eyebrow. You murmur something undecipherable, and I'm back to my soul self and time. Gone, the lying here, gazing at your face forever. So there's a baseball poem and there's a basketball poem. This has a little allusion to Genesis 28:16. Basketball. At 28, she has cast a clear eye on basketball for the first time, and to her delight, caught on. She dreams a little and happens to remember how lost she had felt at the end of an hour at a dig in Israel last year, seeing nothing but sand and rubble, while all around her the others kept spotting pale archaic shards, until suddenly she found herself in a liminal space in the sun dazzle, in which each fragment of pottery cast its own pale coral glow, as if some god were in that place, holy. So now a perfect pick and roll, KG closing for the whole, unfolds slow motion for her with the same lucid clarity as those luminous shards. Two instances of perishable bliss, two spells cast in space, in time. They are visions for her, not fantasy. She's so into it now, she dreamt of Big Baby and Rondo the other night, wholly unself-conscious and wholly amused by the ambiguous undulations of her mind. Okay. This is called Any Misery in the Sound of the Wind, which is a quotation from a Wallace Stevens' poem, The Snowman, and it has a little quote from Job. Its young ones suck up blood, and where the slain are, there it is. Or you're 5.5 and we're sitting in the garage turned family room of the Wickford Street slab rental with the faux wood panels and the brown shag carpet. And mama turtles on TV lumber up from the sea to lay their eggs. And babies break through shell and sand and scurry down the beach as fast as their baby legs can go. And before I can even wonder, why the big rush? It's a long shot, and plummeting like red-tailed hawks or dive bombers is a sky full of wide-winged frigate birds, breaking, grabbing the babies in their talons, soaring, dashing them on the rocks. And you're yelling, tears flying from your face. Why? Sobbing. Why don't they do something? Who, I say? Them, you say, the people making the movie. So keeping, I guess, with the theme of the book of Job, this one's called Raccoon, a favorite subtopic of poets. I think a favorite animal for poets. Thud, pad, 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 dull crash. The plastic garbage can gone over. It's too dark just outside the bedroom window to see, but I know who it is. I remember last spring, we've been leaving bowls of cat food outside the glass door on the patio, and suddenly the cats were acting ravenous every morning. David doing the rolling over on my ankle trick I taught him over and over. The bowls completely empty, save the black blotches that turned out to be telltale. The next evening, you fill the bowls again in the dusk, and I, around midnight, look out from the dining room table. 5, chattering there. I open the door and roar. 4 are up the oak in a hurry. The 5th, huge, fat, hunkering, backing up slowly, bares her teeth, protective. I step toward her. She inches backward toward the tree, an arrow pulled taut against a bowstring, and our eyes meet and lock in the indirect light of the dining room fixture. When the gorillas at the Franklin Park Zoo last summer was sitting at ease, his back against the glass wall of the cave, some kids kept banging the glass until he rolled his hominid yellow eyes, and I thought for all the world, it could have been human, that gesture. And I felt an infinite sadness in him, in me too, aching, in my desperate search for sense, a sadness of slavery or imprisonment, of biology as destiny, of genes, of instinct looking across the infinite abyss at my freedom, at his. But as I look across at this other creature with human hands, 5 feet away, eye to eye, my dread is absolute. This staring raccoon who shared my world for 2 years at least is simply other. I gaze back at her, but what do I know? I was not there when the foundations of the world were set. Now I guess we're moving into the public sphere. Where are we here? This is called He Rises, a vision. And I was writing it all through the fall of 2019, and it's called He Rises, a Vision, January 2nd, 2020. Henry Bacon, architect, knew what he was doing, I tell myself once again, as I approach the memorial and lift my eyes to the broad staircase rising to the enclosed statue of the great man seated within his sanctuary. By the time I reach the bottom of the stairs, he has vanished, the angle of ascent too steep to keep him in view, and I ascend, small in the wide expanse. Daniel Chester, French sculptor, also knew what he was doing. At the top of the stairs, the statue fully visible again, my eyes are drawn to the right leg poised forward as if about to stand, and irresistibly I yield to the vision of the great man rising to his feet, waking from his stony sleep, rising to his feet, waking from his stony sleep as babies of color are again being torn from their mother's arms a century and a half after the Great Civil War. Towering now, I imagine him gazing around the chamber slowly, his deep stone eyes resting for a moment on equal, on liberty, on a new birth of freedom, on binding up the nation's wounds. He turns. I close my eyes. I almost feel the reverberation of long strides, walls, floor, and ceiling trembling as he crosses the room and descends. A mile away, our prickly would-be emperor squats naked in his mirrored room, toad-like, shameless, his cutters and trimmers flitting around him. Outside, the man of stone arrives. Behind the wrought iron fence, he speaks. Emoluments, he says. With charity for none, you wring your bread from the sweat of other men's faces. You tear apart the nation's wounds. I open my eyes, his final words on my lips. You're through. Okay, the next is called Five Consolations. One, two messengers at the entrance before dawn, promise a fertile spring. Two, and your name voiced aloud by your beloved in a dream softly wakes you at 4 a.m. Three, and a flock of crows on a canvas, each one rendered in two black strokes as a child might, descending or ascending. They are buffeted by a dark blue storm wind that turns the wheat fields into rough ochre surf. Four, and you remember that in New Haven once, where the fearless and the bearded poet chanting Om on the city green calmed a crowd and forestalled a riot by terrified police. Five, and pink moonlight, now lacy and faint, is the only trace left of the ominous and stunning blue blood eclipse that slid below the horizon just before dawn. The ideal world. It is not some cafe on the Mediterranean glittering in the sun, the ocean breezes of the spring, the smell of coffee. It is not Yo-Yo Ma and Peter Serkin wordlessly letting us in on the intimate, partly improvised conversation that is the sonata. It is not the clamor and jabber of 80,000 cranes after they have glided to a stop on the marshy lake, having swooped in silent descent from the heavens, nor the fear-filled bravery of those who face down the instruments of tyranny until the opposing phalanxes dissipate in the clear air of morning, nor the seemly colloquy of honest adversaries, nor the bubble within which we cultivate kindness to our own, but a crowded bus on the way home from a demonstration, and a child no older than 3 in her mother's arms, yelling the contagious chant, the people demand social justice, ha'am doresh tzedek chevrati. Okay, there'll be 3 more. This is, I guess, this is central, this one. I guess it says what I think I'm about. It's to my wife. Then there was my awakening in Rakati to the swish and swirl of three voices, barely above whispering, words not perceptible at all. Women's voices, yes, yours, Hetty's, Gabi's, syncopated with the notes of 11-month Roni and 19-month Lewis poking in above the fluid variations in the trio of women. The solos, the duets, the silences, the tzlil, the pitch and timbre of each voice distinct as they slide from earnest softness to passion, to laughter, to small chiding of the kids. Shh, Lila sleeping. So's Papa. Who, I figure, could lie here listening in forever, doing his job, dutifully recording it all for you. Oh, it's 2:50. I'll add one. So three more. Fish roll. This one is called Still Small, and it refers to the still small voice in which God appears in the Book of Kings. A little girl sits, her back and head to a wall, eyes closed, hands together, as if in prayer. A little girl sits against a wall, a third of the way from the right side of a photograph, the soles of her shoes pink at the end of her legs, relaxed and fully extended in white tights. A 3.5-year-old girl sits against a dirty white wall with children's drawings across its whole width, just above the level of her head had she been standing. A faint array of verticals and sharp objects, a square robot's head perhaps, or steeples, missiles, skyscrapers or helicopters, and above them 5 puffy clouds. Roni sits on eroded concrete against a wall in a pink on white jumper and a green long-sleeved shirt, elbows at her sides. Hands clasped together, just touching her slightly uplifted chin, a thick black aura of hair around her peaceful face, a still small silence in the heart of a small nation intoxicated and riven by walls. I guess 2 poems about home. One is called Home. The first is called The City. The plane hums southward down the Hudson, and wheels left, tilting around the battery, with Liberty at the center of the arc it traces, turning north, up the East River toward LaGuardia. The great city below, the edges of skyscrapers and streets make perfectly sharp lines, perfectly still and inanimate in the clear early morning air. The 2 great absences, only a pang now in a passenger's mind, as all of Manhattan appears in miniature, a perfect model of itself that can be taken in whole in a single glance or held in a pair of cupped hands, as if the entire beating metropolis were a child's toy and we were giants. Now, this is the last one. It's called Home. On this brief visit, feeling the familiar mass of short, gray Vermont days, I don't want to go on a pawn of the drab, dark places filled with the wet sands of routine that bury my imagination with the dullness of a steak knife that won't cut butter and a spider mind that plays solitaire on screen, bets on football games, and checks emails again. Which is why yesterday, reading the Odyssey to my 7-year-old grandson, when we get to the scene in which Eurycleia, bathing a stranger, is the first mortal to recognize him, her master, her baby, lost for 20 years to someone else's war. And I described the old nurse running her fingers slowly along the telltale scar on his thigh, feeling and joyously knowing that flesh, though I've read the scene out loud dozens of times. This time my eyes water. And Louis starts crying too and asks, why are we crying, oh papa? Oh, I say, it's so happy and so sad to be home again. 20 years is a long time to be away. Yes, it is, he agrees, nodding soberly. Yes, it is. Thanks. Thank you. Unmute people? I don't know. So.
Okay. Thank you, Bernie. So now, if I've done this right, Bernie wanted me to say that he would be glad to hear comments or take questions, but that if anybody is pressed for time and needs to leave, to feel free to do that. I believe that I've set the controls here so that if you would like to ask a question, you can unmute yourself, and then you can speak. So is there anybody who wants to say anything or ask anything?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Alan from Winnipeg, and Bernie, that was really nice. I especially, I don't think about it often about the roots of our family, and you added a lot of life to it. It was wonderful to hear about your father and some of the old country stories. They're very colorful. Your poetry is very vivid and visual. And I just want to send love and a happy Hanukkah. And boy, it's been a challenging year for everybody. And these things are, I've gotten used to Zoom. It's a nice way to connect. So well wishes from everybody. And thank you for sharing that. You've shared your heart and your soul, and it came through vividly.
Thank you. It's great that you were here.
Glad to be. I'm glad I found out about this.
Great.
Lisa, you've got your hand up. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. Yeah.
Good, very good.
Yeah, just like in class, got to raise your hand.
Yeah.
This was so vivid, Bernie, and I was so glad to see that you read from the arc, through the architecture of the structure of the collection. And so I just wanted to hear about how that journey presented itself, or that from here to home, how you found the sections of the collection, and was it in the writing or was it in the compiling? And
God, it was both. I mean, a thing I could say about the writing is that narrative about my father took me 15 years to write. And it wasn't that I was at it. I'd sit down, and that was the scene that I couldn't write. The scene that I read today was a scene that I found impossible to write. So that in itself was extending. The book is 10 years in the writing. And it's really and the writing was mixed in time. Because what happens to me is when I sit down, I mean, there are other poems I could read that do that very directly. I'm looking now at my daughter Gabi in the middle of the screen. And as I sit down to write something about her, flipped into something that happened when she was a child. And there are poems that address that. So that the time, I don't believe in time. Or I believe that, as someone said, we can't control the future, we could control the past, because the past keeps changing every time your imagination acts on it. If my brother is here somewhere, we've had experiences where I've described, and Linda I was in the car with Linda when she had the exact experience of, we go someplace with her sister, she should rest in peace, in the car, and Linda would say, this was the house we lived in then, or she says, no, it wasn't, your memory's wrong. And I had that same kind of exchange with my brother. And I think we both now, oh, here he is. We both now agree to disagree about memory, to say your memories are right and my memories are right. And we could have been in the same moment, at the same place, at the same time. And I remember it this way and you remember it this way. So I think there's William Carlos Williams wrote, "The memory's a kind of accomplishment." And I think in the composition, they were both contemporary ones and family ones and political ones are being composed at the same time. And when I put it together, I tried many things, but what I finally figured out is that the first part should alternate between my parents' experiences. There's a poem that I didn't read. My mother was one who spoke about her past. Hedya, she's up there, and I once went to a Holocaust memorial thing, Holocaust, not memorial thing, an event at Dartmouth that was co-done with Tel Aviv University about children of survivors. And Hedya is a child of a survivor. And I, until I went to that conference, didn't know I was a child of a survivor because our parents, even though they were not in Europe between 1941 and 1945, they are both survivors of pogroms. And, yeah, and I realized that that fact about my father at that conference.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, memory, yeah. Memory creates, and memory makes our life. One of the things that made what happened with my father so awful is I have no idea what he remembered. For example, does memory get damaged by the stroke as well? And what happens to your identity if you forget? And we've all had the experience of people who were losing their memories, right? And what happens to that? How do we esteem them? How do we respect them when they lose that? Yeah. Other thing. Merv.
Bernie,
Yeah.
that whole thing with knowing my generation, I've known it all the time. I've known
Right.
it all the time because I'm one step away.
Right.
You know, it's not 5 generations ago.
Right.
The grandfather, it's uncles,
Yeah.
it's aunts, it's cousins. I mean, it's not like a grandfather, great grandfather. No, this was a grandpa who would have been a grandpa to me.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just that simple. So
Yeah, Merv and I don't know never met any of our grandparents.
no, they died before. Forget about knowing them. They died before we were born.
Yeah.
Before I was born, even.
Yeah.
It was yeah, a long time before, pretty long time before I was born.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
Now I read the poems a little better.
Thank you. Thank you.
So any other questions or comments?
Bernie, I've got the book and now I've seen the movie.
Maureen.
I'm absolutely stunned that you can be so open. I don't know, it's as you know, I can't do that. So I think it's absolutely incredible that you can put it out there.
No, I had a realization. I was a student of Charles Olson, who is a great mythological poet, and only a handful of poems that were personal. But I was reading at the 50th anniversary or something, anniversary of his death, and I was reading some poems, and I don't think got to talking with Ed Sanders, who's a great poet, and what he got me to think of was that the same way that, say, for a poet like William Carlos Williams, Patterson, the city can provide a mythological structure of vertebrae, or for Ezra Pound, the Odyssey can do it. For Charles Olson, Gloucester, Massachusetts can do it. I think the vertebrae is my family, and family in a way functions for me to enable me to write about everything else. If I don't write about family, I can't write about anything. So even the political poems are that. I mean, are that as well. So I can't do it. I think the thing is, I can't do it any other way. But I understand what you're saying. I don't think of them as confessional, actually. I don't. At Alan and Helen, you're looking at two of the chairs of my department. When I was in the department.
Okay, we can
Helen,
hear you
yes.
now, Helen. Yeah.
I just want to say, I think other vertebrae for you, Bernie, is your literature. And the one with the Odyssey coming in at the end, I thought was just beautiful.
Thank you.
To take that very small personal gesture of the woman washing and making all the meaning of coming home through just that gesture. And the other one I really liked was the one about Lincoln. And
Thank you.
the way the statue came alive for him as he walked up. So thanks very much. I enjoyed the reading. I'm going to
Thank you.
check out and I'll see you Thursday.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
great.
Good to see you. Okay. Anybody else?
Cousins, unmute yourself.
Both Eugene and I were really enjoying the reading, and we're so happy that we could be a part of it.
Thank you.
And I
Thank-
also wish you and your family a healthy and a happy Hanukkah.
Thank
Wish
you. You too.
everything good for everyone.
Yeah, we need a good year.
We need a good year.
So Bernie, let me just tell you, I don't know whether you were looking at this, but you had 60 people at this reading, which is a pretty
Wow.
good, it's a pretty good turnout for a reading. And not only that, you had people from a 10,000 mile range. And
Yeah.
I know everybody joins me in thanking you for a wonderful reading. And those of you who don't yet have the book, I'll remind you once again, Love's Fingerprints. And it's obtainable easily online, or if you would like Bernie to inscribe it for you, just email him, contact him, and he will negotiate with you about that. But it's a very, very full book, as you can now completely understand, I think. Much in it to be explored and to think about and to how can I put it? To empathize with.
Reva wants to say something. Yeah.
I just want to say that Doris is unmuted now.
Oh, good.
Me?
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, it was beautiful. It was just beautiful. You said things that I hardly remember, and yet I do remember. Your mother was the one that talked and told us
Yeah.
all the things that we would not have known otherwise.
Yeah, that was what I started to say before I did that digression and lost my way into that Holocaust Museum visit, is that my father said almost nothing. I know. I have a poem in which I talk about, I know 3 things about my father, and my mother was one of the sort of survivor who talked.
Yeah.
Told
Yeah.
us all these stories, who told us all these stories.
And I blessed her for it,
Yes.
because nobody else in the family talked.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And happy Hanukkah.
Doris is my first cousin. My first cousin.
She's my cousin too.
Yes, we're doing
I've
that.
got a
Sheila,
cousin.
so we
My
have
cousin too, and
4
I've never
first
met
cousins
her.
on. We have
Bob and Malky.
Oh, there's Ella. Hi, Ella.
Hi, Ella.
There's Ella.
Who's saying hi to me?
We all are.
Marley.
Oh,
Doris
Marley,
is.
hi.
And Marley.
First
First of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you for inviting us and letting us be a part of this incredible reading. And thank you for taking the memories that I'm just sort of amazed at the fact that you can remember all of these things, because I have so little memory of my parents and stories and and it's just amazing, the detail. And some of the things that you said and wrote are things that I do not know about, and I would love to hear more details. And thank you.
Yeah. What I'd say is that if you start doing it, you remember more. That the memory, if you start to recollect and you start to write about something that you recollect, at least that's been my experience, and I've seen that with students. What happens is it starts to open up, and you start to remember more and more and more. It's an interesting. I think that's so. What I'd say is start writing down things that you remember. And you, yeah.
Yeah, I'm Jean Hoots. I'm Bernie's publisher, because I don't share Bernie's culture. I was Catholic, but the way it's still communicated to me, and it's almost like, even though it's a different culture in some ways, there's still that resonance of being a human and having parents and people that we love, and the things that happened to our parents and their memories. My mother grew up in Italy during World War II, and they, even though her immediate family was Catholic, one of her relatives married a Jew, and they had to flee Italy at a certain time, and the mother died in Portugal before they had a chance to come to America. So there's always a link. And the thing about people like Bernie, who are poets, they can make the link more real, I think, than the average person trying to describe it. So I really appreciate being part of this work.
We thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ah.
Okay, one more. Marley, you have your hand up.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Come on.
I just wanted to say that, first of all, thank you, Bernie. That was absolutely beautiful and very inspiring. And it's incredible to hear a poet speak their poems. It means so much more. And I just wanted to say that my father, very much like your mother, Auntie Bella, did talk a lot.
Yeah.
And so, some of the stories that you talked about were somewhat familiar, especially when you were talking about your mom. Unfortunately, my mother didn't, although, she was born in Winnipeg and didn't go through those things, but she didn't really talk about her past. My dad talked about my mom's past, but as I said, like Auntie Bella, he did talk about a lot about the pogroms and making their way across Europe and to Canada, and it was just very reminiscent to hear you talk about it in Albany.
Yes.
All right. Well, once again, Bernie, thank you so much for the reading, and we'll give you one final round of applause there.
And thank you, all of you. Thank you, all of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
For me.